The sterile white walls of the delivery room were closing in on Olivia Beaumont. A wave of pain, sharp and blinding, ripped through her, forcing a guttural cry from her lips. The monitor beside her beeped in a frantic, relentless rhythm, a soundtrack to her agony. But it was the silence that was truly deafening. The space beside her where her husband Nick's hand should have been was cold and empty. Her phone buzzed again on the side table, a cruel punctuation mark in her suffering. She knew who it was. She also knew he wouldn't answer. Because Nicholas Preston, the man who had promised her forever, was at that very moment choosing his forever, and it wasn't her. It wasn't even the 2 children she was fighting to bring into the world. Olivia and Nicholas Preston were to the outside world the golden couple of Boston's burgeoning tech scene. He was the charismatic founder of Preston Innovations, a man whose ambition was as sharp and polished as his designer suits. She was the brilliant architect who had set aside her own promising career to support her keen eye for design and structure, ironically helping him build a life she was about to be evicted from. Their brownstone on Beacon Hill was a testament to their success, all exposed brick minimalist art and floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city that was supposed to be theirs for the taking. Olivia was 38 weeks pregnant with twins, the long-awaited completion of their perfect picture. The cracks, however, had been forming for months. They were hairline at first. Nick staying late for investor meetings that left him smelling faintly of a perfume that wasn't hers, a specific expensive scent, something like Chanel No. 5, but sharper. The second phone, the one he called his work mobile, that he guarded with the ferocity of a dragon hoarding gold. The emotional distance that had crept between them, turning their sprawling bed into a desolate landscape. Olivia, ever the optimist, had blamed it on the stress of the twins' impending arrival and a new multi-million-dollar merger Nick was trying to close. "Just a little longer, Liv," he'd murmur, kissing her forehead. "Once this deal with Reed Global is done, it's just you and me and the babies. I promise." Reed Global. The name now tasted like ash in her mouth. Cassandra Reed, the company's vice president, was a woman carved from ice and ambition. Olivia had met her once at a company gala. She was stunning with raven hair and eyes that seemed to analyze and dismiss you in the same glance. She had shaken Olivia's hand, her manicured nails pressing just a little too hard, her smile never quite reaching her eyes. "You're so brave," Cassandra had said, glancing at Olivia's swollen belly. "Giving up everything like this." It wasn't a compliment. The day the labor started, it was sudden and fierce. A Tuesday morning. Nick had just left, claiming an unavoidable emergency board meeting. As the first debilitating contraction seized her, Olivia had called him, her voice tight with pain. "Nick, it's time," she gasped. "The hospital, my water just broke." There was a pause on the other end of the line filled with an unnerving static. "Liv, I can't. Not right now. The Reed deal is happening today. This is the final signature. It's everything we've worked for." "Everything we've worked for is in this delivery room," she cried out, another contraction stealing her breath. "Nicholas, please, I need you." "I'll be there as soon as I can," he said, his voice distant, detached. "Just hold on." He hung up. Her sister Jenna had driven her to Massachusetts General Hospital, her face a mask of fury. For hours, Olivia endured the escalating agony, her hope dwindling with every unanswered text, every call that went straight to voicemail. The nurses exchanged pitying glances. At 3:17 p.m., with a final primal scream, Noah Preston was born. 2 minutes later, his sister Sophie followed. They were small, perfect, and utterly oblivious to the fact that their father had abandoned them at the threshold of their lives. As Olivia held her two babies, tears of joy and heartbreak mingling on her cheeks, her phone finally rang. It was Nick. "Liv?" His voice was strangely breathless. "They're here, Nick," she whispered, her voice raw. "A boy and a girl. They're beautiful." She waited for the elation, the apology, the sound of him rushing to the hospital. Instead, she heard a woman's voice in the background, low and possessive. Cassandra Reed's voice. "Is everything all right, darling?" A chilling silence fell. Then Nick's voice returned, stripped of all warmth. "Olivia, I'm sorry. Things have changed. Cassandra and we're flying to Geneva tonight. The deal is signed. This is my new life now." "Your new life?" Olivia's voice was barely a whisper. The room felt like it was tilting. "What about your children? What about us?" "I'll have my lawyer contact you about the arrangements," he said, his tone clinical, as if discussing a business transaction. "He'll be generous. It's better this way. For everyone." The line went dead. Olivia stared at the phone, the words echoing in the sterile room more painful than any contraction. He hadn't just left her in labor. He had erased her. He had traded his family for a contract and a life wrapped in cold, hard cash. She looked down at the two innocent faces nestled against her, Noah and Sophie, and a new feeling, fierce and terrifying, began to smolder in the ashes of her heart, a mother's resolve. She was alone, but they were not. She would protect them, no matter what it took. The world had taken her husband, but it would not take her strength. The days that followed were a blur of fluorescent lights, the scent of antiseptic, and the ceaseless, beautiful demands of two newborns. Jenna was her rock, but she had her own family, her own life. Soon Olivia was back in the Beacon Hill brownstone, a place that now felt less like a home and more like an opulent tomb filled with the ghosts of broken promises. The generosity Nick had promised was a cruel joke. A single wire transfer appeared in her account, enough to cover the hospital bills and perhaps 2 months of expenses. Then silence. A week later, a letter arrived from a high-powered law firm, not Nick's usual corporate counsel, but a ruthless divorce firm known for gutting spouses. It outlined a paltry child support offer, contingent on her signing a sweeping NDA and relinquishing any and all claims to the assets of Preston Innovations. The brownstone, it turned out, was leased by the company. The cars, the art, the very furniture she sat on, all corporate assets. She and her 2 infants were to vacate the premises within 30 days. Panic, cold and sharp, began to set in. Her own savings had been depleted during the high-risk pregnancy. She hadn't worked in 2 years. She had 2 babies entirely dependent on her, and she was about to be homeless. She spent her nights feeding Noah and Sophie the blue light of her phone, illuminating her tear-streaked face as she scrolled through job listings for architects, her portfolio woefully out of date. Her days were spent packing boxes, the sight of Nick's possessions, his golf clubs, his expensive watches, his framed photo with the governor, sending fresh waves of nausea through her. On the 29th day, with the house mostly empty, and her options nearly exhausted, the doorbell rang. Standing on her doorstep was a man she recognized instantly, a man who was the living embodiment of everything Nicholas Preston feared and loathed. Damien Devereaux. If Nick was the golden boy of Boston tech, Damien was its dark prince. A self-made billionaire, he ran Devereaux Enterprises, a sprawling conglomerate that was Preston Innovations' chief competitor. The rivalry between the two men was legendary, a battle fought in boardrooms, stock market floors, and scathing op-eds in the Wall Street Journal. Damien was older, harder a man who didn't play the game so much as rewrite the rules to ensure he always won. He was tall and imposing, dressed in a bespoke charcoal suit that probably cost more than her car. His hair was dark, threaded with silver at the temples, and his eyes were a startling, intelligent gray that seemed to see right through her exhaustion and despair. "Mrs. Preston," he said, his voice a low baritone that held no warmth but commanded attention. "My apologies for the intrusion. May I have a moment of your time?" Stunned into silence, Olivia could only nod, stepping aside to let him in. He walked into the half-empty living room, his gaze sweeping over the packed boxes with an unreadable expression. "I won't waste your time with pleasantries," he began, turning to face her. "I am aware of your situation, of your husband's departure." He said the word with a subtle, cutting disdain. "And I'm aware of the insulting terms his lawyers have offered." Olivia bristled. "How could you possibly know that?" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Nicholas Preston likes to boast, and the people he boasts to often have loyalties that money can't buy, but information can. He believes he has won. He is celebrating in a penthouse in Geneva with Cassandra Reed, convinced he has shed all his liabilities." Damien's gray eyes locked onto hers. "He is mistaken. His greatest assets are in this room, and he was too foolish to realize it." Olivia clutched her robe tighter. "What do you want, Mr. Devereaux?" He took a step closer, his presence filling the cavernous room. "Your husband and I have been rivals for a decade. He has cost me contracts, poached my employees, and slandered my name. He values only one thing, victory, the image of success. I want to take that from him. I want to watch his entire world, the one he chose over you, burn to the ground." The sheer venom in his voice was shocking. "That has nothing to do with me," Olivia said, her voice trembling slightly. "On the contrary," Damien countered smoothly, "it has everything to do with you. You are his one weakness, the loose thread he left behind. The story of the wife he abandoned in labor for his business partner. It's a story that in the right hands could do irreparable damage to his reputation. But that's thinking too small." He paused, letting the silence hang in the air. "I am here to make you a proposition, Mrs. Preston. A business proposition of sorts." He laid out his plan with cold, calculated precision. He would provide for her and the children. Not just provide, but give them a life of unparalleled comfort and security. A beautiful home in a gated community in Brookline. A nanny, a housekeeper, the best of everything. He would fund a trust for the twins that would make them independently wealthy before they could even walk. He would finance her return to architecture, helping her start her own firm free from the shadow of her husband's name. Olivia stared at him, bewildered. Why would you do any of this? Because..." Damien said, his eyes glinting like steel. "In 5 years, when your children are old enough to understand, we will petition to have their surname legally changed to Devereaux. We will let the world believe they are mine. Nicholas will have his money and his mistress, but he will have lost his legacy. His name will die with him. There is no revenge more absolute than to have your enemy raise your children as his own, to have them love him while they forget you ever existed." The audacity of it was breathtaking. It was a devil's bargain, a plan born of pure, unadulterated hatred for Nick. But as Olivia looked at the boxes surrounding her, as she thought of the looming deadline and the 2 innocent lives sleeping in the next room, desperation warred with her pride. This wasn't about love or affection. It was a cold, strategic alliance. He would use her and her children as the ultimate weapon in his war against Nick. And in return, she and her children would get a future, safety, a life. "I need to think," she stammered. "There's no time," Damien said, his tone final. "His lawyers are filing for your eviction tomorrow at 9 a.m. My offer stands until then." He placed a simple, elegant business card on the mantelpiece. "A car will be waiting for you outside at 8 a.m. If you are in it, I will have my answer. If not, I wish you the best of luck, Mrs. Preston." He turned and walked out, leaving Olivia alone in the echoing silence of her ruined life. She looked at the card, then in the direction of the nursery where her babies slept. Damien Devereaux was offering her a gilded cage, a life built on a lie, all for the sake of a billionaire's vengeance. But a gilded cage was still a cage that kept the wolves at bay. As the first light of dawn broke over Boston, Olivia Beaumont made her choice. She would not be a victim. She would be a survivor. And if survival meant making a deal with her husband's devil, then she would learn to dance in the flames. The car that arrived at 8 a.m. was a black, impossibly sleek sedan with tinted windows. The driver, a stoic man named Arthur, who would become a quiet fixture in their lives, loaded her few remaining personal boxes and the precious cargo of 2 infant car seats without a word. As they pulled away from the Beacon Hill brownstone, Olivia didn't look back. The life Damien Devereaux provided was beyond anything she could have imagined. Their new home in Brookline wasn't just a house. It was an estate. A sprawling stone manor set behind a formidable iron gate surrounded by acres of manicured lawns and ancient oak trees. It was private, secure, and beautiful. Inside, it was a blank canvas. "Decorate it as you see fit," Damien had told her during their first formal meeting in his downtown office, a place of steel and glass that overlooked the entire city. "This is your home, the children's home." He was true to his word in every respect. A kind, competent nanny named Maria was hired. A trust fund was established in the names of Noah and Sophie Beaumont, managed by the most respected firm in Boston, and a corner office in a chic downtown building was leased for Beaumont Design, with a generous operating budget and a small team of staff. The arrangement was peculiar. Damien was an ever-present but distant figure. He was not trying to be a father, not yet. He was the benefactor, the architect of their new reality. He would visit the house twice a week, always in the evening. He wouldn't hold the babies, but he would stand by their cribs for long moments, his expression unreadable. He spoke to Olivia with a detached politeness, inquiring about the business, the house, the children's health. It was an alliance, not a friendship. Olivia, in turn, threw herself into her work and her children. Beaumont Design flourished. Her talent, sharpened by her time away, was undeniable. She designed sleek, modern homes for Boston's elite, her name quickly becoming synonymous with innovative elegance. She was no longer Olivia Preston, the abandoned wife. She was Olivia Beaumont, a force in her own right. The years began to melt away. Noah grew into a serious, inquisitive boy with his father's dark hair, but a quiet intensity that was all his own. He was fascinated by how things worked, disassembling toys and gadgets with a focus that was startling in a 5-year-old. Sophie was his opposite, a whirlwind of laughter and creativity with Olivia's warm eyes and a wild mane of auburn curls. She painted on any surface she could find, her tiny fingers constantly smudged with color. Damien's role in their lives slowly, almost imperceptibly shifted. The detached benefactor became a quiet presence. He started having dinner with them on his visiting nights. He would listen as Sophie chattered about her day, and he'd sit on the floor with Noah, patiently helping him build complex Lego structures that Olivia couldn't begin to comprehend. They never called him Dad. He never asked them to. To them, he was Damien. He was the man who was always there. He was the one who taught Noah how to fly a kite on the vast lawn, whose deep voice was the one they heard reading them bedtime stories on Tuesday and Thursday nights. He attended parent-teacher conferences and preschool recitals, a formidable figure in a sea of suburban parents. The world as he had planned began to draw its own conclusions. Whispers followed them, the reclusive billionaire and his beautiful family. Olivia and Damien never discussed the terms of their original agreement. It was an unspoken foundation beneath their strange, carefully constructed life. She found herself relying on his quiet strength, his unwavering stability. Their conversations evolved from polite inquiries to genuine discussions about business politics, and most surprisingly, their children. She saw glimpses of a man beneath the corporate armor, a dry wit, a surprising patience, a fierce protectiveness that was directed entirely at Noah and Sophie. Meanwhile, news of Nicholas Preston and Cassandra Reed would occasionally filter through financial journals or glossy gossip magazines. They were the ultimate power couple, conquering Europe from their base in Geneva. Photos showed them on yachts in Monaco, at ski resorts in Gstaad, the very picture of opulent success. Nick looked handsome, powerful, and happy. Olivia would look at the photos, a hollow ache in her chest, and then look at her children safe and thriving, and know she had made the right choice. The first crack in Nick's perfect world appeared 6 years after he left. It was a small article buried in the back of the Financial Times. Preston Innovations faces scrutiny over accounting practices. A few months later, a larger story. Key investors pull funding amid fraud allegations. Damien mentioned it casually over dinner one night. It seems your ex-husband's creative ambition extended to his balance sheets. He said his tone neutral, but Olivia saw a flicker of grim satisfaction in his eyes. That night, for the first time in 6 years, Olivia's personal phone rang with an unknown international number. She stared at it, her heart pounding. She let it go to voicemail. The message was 3 words spoken in a voice she barely recognized, a voice frayed with desperation and disbelief. "Olivia, it's me." She deleted it without a second thought. But she knew with a certainty that chilled her to the bone that the ghost she had buried 6 years ago was about to come clawing his way back. The world Damien had built for them was strong, but she was about to find out if it was strong enough to withstand the man who had tried to destroy her first. In Geneva, the penthouse that overlooked the lake had begun to feel less like a palace and more like a prison. The initial euphoria of their victory, the stolen company, the limitless wealth, the brazen escape, had long since curdled into a routine of bitter resentment. Nicholas Preston had discovered a terrible truth: the life he had coveted was hollow. Cassandra Reed was not a partner. She was a conqueror. She had wanted his company, not his heart. Their conversations were no longer about shared dreams, but about market shares and expense reports. The passion that had once seemed so intoxicating was now a demanding, exhausting performance. She was beautiful, brilliant, and utterly devoid of the warmth and unconditional support Olivia had given him so freely. He also discovered that running a global corporation built on a foundation of risky, borderline fraudulent deals was a house of cards in a hurricane. The aggressive accounting that had fueled their rapid expansion was now a liability. Investigators from the SEC and their European counterparts were circling like sharks. The creative deals he'd been so proud of were being unraveled one by one. The final blow came not from a regulator, but from within. Cassandra, ever the pragmatist, saw the writing on the wall. One morning, Nick woke up to find her side of the bed empty. A note on the nightstand informed him that she had accepted a severance package from the board, a package that gave her a significant portion of the company's remaining liquid assets in exchange for her resignation and, more importantly, her cooperation with the authorities. She had sold him out to save herself. Within a month, Preston Innovations was forced into bankruptcy. Nicholas Preston, the wunderkind of Boston Tech, was ruined. His assets were frozen, his reputation shattered. He was left with a mountain of legal bills and a small protected trust fund his father had set up for him years ago, enough to live on, but a pittance compared to the empire he had built and lost. He was adrift. Humiliated and alone in a foreign city, the sycophants and fair-weather friends who had orbited his wealth vanished overnight. In the crushing silence of his new, much smaller apartment, his thoughts invariably turned back to Boston, to the life he had so carelessly discarded. He started searching online. He found articles about Beaumont design, stunned by Olivia's success. He saw photos of her at charity events, poised and elegant, often with Damien Devereaux standing discreetly nearby. Then he found the school newsletters, the local society pages, photos of a Little League game, a school play. And there they were, his children. Noah with his serious eyes holding a science fair trophy, Sophie with her riot of curls covered in paint and grinning proudly next to an easel. They were happy. They were healthy. And in every picture, Damien Devereaux was there looking at them with a quiet pride that twisted a knife in Nick's gut. Regret, an emotion he had long suppressed, consumed him. He hadn't just made a mistake. He had committed an act of profound, life-altering stupidity. He had thrown away real gold for glittering dust. He told himself it was the pressure, Cassandra's manipulation, his own ambition. But deep down, he knew the truth. It was a failure of character, a moral bankruptcy that had preceded the financial one. Fueled by a cocktail of desperation, remorse, and a burning envy for what Damien Devereaux had, he made a decision. He wasn't just going to apologize. He was going to get his family back. He booked a one-way ticket to Boston, clinging to a delusional hope that the man they once knew was still someone they could love. He convinced himself that Olivia, his sweet, forgiving Liv, would see his remorse and welcome him home. He had forgotten the woman he had abandoned, but he was about to meet the woman he had created. The first sighting was subtle. A car parked too long down the street from the estate. A glimpse of a man in a coffee shop near Olivia's office, who looked hauntingly familiar. Olivia dismissed it as paranoia, the lingering trauma of the past. Then came the phone calls, blocked numbers hang-ups as soon as she answered. An email from an anonymous account with a single attachment, a photo of him and Olivia on their wedding day with the subject line, "Remember us." The siege had begun. The direct confrontation happened on a crisp autumn afternoon. Olivia was picking the twins up from their private school in Chestnut Hill. As Noah and Sophie ran towards her, their backpacks bouncing, a figure stepped out from behind a large oak tree. It was Nicholas. He looked diminished. The bespoke suits were gone, replaced by a rumpled jacket and jeans. The arrogant swagger had been replaced by a nervous energy. But the face was the same, the face that had once been her entire world. "Liv," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Olivia's blood ran cold. She instinctively pushed Noah and Sophie behind her, her body forming a protective shield. "What are you doing here, Nick?" "I had to see them," he pleaded, his eyes fixated on the children peeking out from behind her legs. "They're so big. They look perfect." Sophie hid her face in Olivia's coat, but Noah stared at the strange man with a child's unfiltered curiosity. "Mommy, who is that?" The question struck Olivia with the force of a physical blow. To them, this man was a stranger. "He's someone I used to know," she said, her voice steely. "You are not welcome here, Nick. You need to leave. Now." "Please, Liv, just let me talk to them. Let me explain," he begged, taking a step forward. "I made a terrible mistake. I've lost everything. I realize now that you and they are all that ever mattered." The audacity of his self-pity was staggering. "You don't get to do this," she hissed, her voice low and furious. "You don't get to abandon them to not exist for 6 years and then show up at their school expecting a welcome party. They have a life here, a happy, stable life that has nothing to do with you." "With him," Nick spat, his desperation turning to anger as a black sedan pulled up to the curb. Arthur was behind the wheel. "You replaced me with Damien Devereaux, my worst enemy. You let him raise my children." "He didn't leave them." Olivia shot back the words like bullets. "He was there for every scraped knee, every nightmare, every birthday. He's more of a father to them than you could ever dream of being. Now get away from us." She bundled the shaken twins into the car and drove away, not daring to look in the rearview mirror. But the confrontation was only the beginning. Nick, having failed in his appeal to emotion, turned to the law. A week later, Olivia was served with a petition for parental rights. His lawyer, a smarmy opportunist named Peterson, argued that Nicholas Preston, a reformed and remorseful man, had been unjustly kept from his biological children and was seeking court-mandated visitation. The battle turned ugly. Nick's legal team painted Olivia as a bitter woman who had fallen into the clutches of a manipulative billionaire, using her children as pawns in a corporate war. They dredged up details of Damien's ruthless business reputation to portray him as an unfit guardian. Damien's response was swift and brutal. His legal team, the best in the country, was a phalanx of impenetrable resolve. They countersued for sole legal and physical custody and filed a restraining order against Nick. They compiled a mountain of evidence: the abandonment at the hospital, the 6 years of complete silence and non-support, Nick's financial ruin, and the fraud allegations that surrounded it. The process was a nightmare for Olivia. It forced her to relive the worst moments of her life in depositions. It created a cloud of uncertainty that began to affect the children. Noah grew quieter, more withdrawn. Sophie started having nightmares. One evening, after a particularly grueling day with the lawyers, Olivia found Damien in his study. "He's going to hurt them," she said, her voice breaking. "This fight, this poison, it's going to ruin the peace we've built." Damien stood up from his desk and walked over to her. For the first time, he dropped the formal barrier that had always existed between them. He placed his hands on her shoulders, his gray eyes searching hers. "He will not lay a hand on them, Olivia. He will not win," Damien said with a chilling certainty. "I have held one card back in this game. It is a cruel one, and I had hoped never to play it. But he has left me no choice. It's time he understood the true nature of the enmity between us. It was never just business." Olivia looked at him confused. "What do you mean?" "I'm going to tell you a story. Olivia," he said, his voice low and heavy with a grief she had never heard before. "About a man named Robert Jensen, and about the night my own world ended long before I ever met you." The study was silent, except for the low crackle of the fire Damien had lit in the hearth. The shadows danced on the walls lined with books on finance history and philosophy. It was a room that spoke of power and intellect, but tonight it felt like a confessional. 8 years ago, Damien began, his voice devoid of its usual commanding tone, now hollowed out by memory. I was married. Her name was Isabel. She was a violinist with the Boston Symphony. She was everything. He paused, looking into the flames, as if seeing a ghost. We had a son, Thomas. He was 4 years old. He had his mother's smile and my stubbornness. Olivia sat down, her own troubles momentarily forgotten, captivated by this unexpected window into Damien's soul. She had never once considered his life before he entered hers. He had always seemed so complete, so self-contained. We were driving back from my parents' house in Connecticut one night. Damien continued, his jaw tight. It was late, raining. Thomas was asleep in his car seat. A car came out of nowhere, speeding, swerving all over the road. It hit us head on. The air in the room grew heavy, thick with unspoken tragedy. I woke up in the hospital. I had a broken leg, 3 fractured ribs, a severe concussion. But I was alive. Isabel and Thomas, they weren't so lucky. They died at the scene. Olivia let out a soft gasp, her hand flying to her mouth. Oh, Damien, I'm so sorry. I never knew. He gave a slight dismissive shake of his head, as if his grief were an old coat he was long used to wearing. The driver of the other car was drunk. His blood alcohol level was more than twice the legal limit. His name was Robert Jensen. He was a senior executive at a rapidly expanding tech firm, a rising star. Damien finally turned from the fire, and his gray eyes, usually so cool and analytical, were burning with an intensity that startled her. The firm was Preston Innovations. Olivia felt the blood drain from her face. Nick's company. Jensen was Nick's right-hand man. Damien explained, his voice turning to ice. They were on the verge of closing a massive deal, the one that put them on the map. A conviction for vehicular manslaughter would have scuttled the whole thing. The investors would have pulled out. The scandal would have destroyed them. So Nicholas Preston, ever the pragmatist, orchestrated a cover-up. He hired the best, most ruthless lawyers in the city. They buried evidence. They intimidated witnesses. They painted me as the one who was speeding, who crossed the center line. They turned Robert Jensen, a drunk who killed a woman and a child, into the victim. In the end, Jensen got off with a slap on the wrist. 6 months probation for reckless driving. Nick's deal went through. He celebrated his victory while I was burying my family. The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place in Olivia's mind, forming a picture of unimaginable cruelty. Damien's rivalry with Nick wasn't about market share or corporate ego. It was a cold, patient, all-consuming quest for justice, or perhaps for vengeance. I tried to fight it, Damien said, his voice low, but their lies were airtight. I had lost my family, and the man responsible was protected by the empire your husband was building. So I changed tactics. I couldn't beat him in court, so I decided to beat him in the world he valued most. I focused all my energy on Devereaux Enterprises with the singular goal of crushing him. Every deal I stole, every employee I poached, it was all for Isabel and Thomas. He looked at Olivia, and for the first time she understood the full depth of the man standing before her. She understood the offer he had made her 6 years ago, not as a cynical act of revenge, but as something far more complex. When I heard what he did to you, Damien said softly, leaving you in that hospital, abandoning his own children on the day they were born, I saw him doing it all over again, sacrificing family decency, humanity, all for a deal, for a victory. I saw my chance not just to ruin him, but to build something good from the wreckage he leaves in his wake. He took a step closer to her. This was never just about using you as a weapon, Olivia. It was about protecting Noah and Sophie from a man who is fundamentally hollow. A man who would cover up the death of a child to close a deal. That is the card I have left to play. That is the truth we will present to the court. And that is the man who is trying to claim parental rights to your children. Olivia was speechless. The man she had married, the father of her children, was not just a cheat and a coward. He was a monster cloaked in a charismatic smile. The last vestiges of any sympathy she might have held for him evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard certainty. "Do it," she said, her voice clear and strong. "Play the card. End this." Damien nodded slowly. The war for the children's future was about to enter its final, devastating stage. The revelation of the Robert Jensen case was a bombshell dropped in the middle of the custody hearing. Damien's lawyers presented the evidence with chilling precision, old police reports, buried witness statements they had spent years unearthing, financial records showing payments from Preston Innovations to key individuals involved in the original investigation. They weren't just accusing Nick of moral bankruptcy. They were building a case for obstruction of justice. Nick, sitting beside his lawyer, turned a ghastly shade of pale. He looked across the courtroom at Damien, and for the first time he seemed to understand the true nature of the force that had been working against him for nearly a decade. This wasn't a business rival. This was a ghost, a specter of vengeance he had unknowingly created years ago. The judge, a stern, no-nonsense woman named Maria Lopez, listened to the evidence with a deepening frown. The custody case was rapidly turning into an inquiry into a potential criminal conspiracy. Nick's lawyer Peterson could see the case, and his payday disintegrating before his eyes. Faced with public ruin and possible criminal charges, Nick folded. Peterson requested a recess, and within the hour, a deal was reached. Nicholas Preston would withdraw his petition for parental rights. He would terminate all claims to Noah and Sophie forever. In return, Damien Devereaux would not pursue criminal charges for the cover-up. It was a checkmate. The final confrontation didn't happen in a courtroom, but in the sterile hallway outside. Nick, looking utterly broken, waited for Olivia and Damien to emerge. "Was it all for this?" he asked, his voice a hoarse whisper directed at Damien. "All of it. The last 8 years you built an empire just to destroy me." "I built an empire in spite of what you did," Damien corrected him, his voice cold as a winter grave. "Destroying you was just a potential dividend." Nick then turned his desperate gaze to Olivia. "Liv, I didn't know about his family. The Jensen thing. It was just business. A problem to be managed. I swear." Olivia looked at the man she had once loved, the father of her children, and felt nothing but a profound, sorrowful pity. "It was never just business, Nick. That's what you've never understood. It was a woman and a child. It was a wife in labor. It was your son and your daughter. You see people as assets or liabilities, problems to be managed. You don't see the humanity. That's why you lost. Not just today. You lost 6 years ago in that hospital." He searched her face for a flicker of the old affection, a spark of forgiveness, but he found none. There was nothing left to burn. Defeated, he simply nodded and walked away, a ghost disappearing down the long courthouse corridor, exiting their lives as completely as he had the day the twins were born. That evening, the house on the hill was quiet. The legal storm had passed. Olivia was tucking Sophie into bed, who had a question in her sleepy eyes. "Mommy," she whispered, "is that man going to come back?" "No, sweetie," Olivia said, stroking her hair. "He's gone. You're safe." Later, she found Damien on the large stone terrace overlooking the gardens, staring up at the night sky. For a long time, they stood in a comfortable silence, the years of their strange arrangement settling around them, no longer a contract, but a life. "Damien," Olivia said softly. "Thank you. For everything." He turned to her, the moonlight softening the hard lines of his face. "There's nothing to thank me for. Protecting them, protecting you, it's the most important work I've ever done. It's the first thing in a long time that has made me feel whole." In that moment, the unspoken truth that had been growing between them for years finally surfaced. This was not an alliance anymore. It wasn't about revenge or protection. It had, against all odds, become a family. A broken man and a betrayed woman had found a way to piece together their shattered lives and build something new, something stronger. A few weeks later, Olivia was in her office when Noah came in holding a piece of paper. It was a drawing for a school project titled My Family. On it were 4 stick figures: a woman with auburn hair labeled Mommy, a little girl with a splash of yellow for hair labeled Sophie, a little boy labeled Me, and a tall figure beside him, a man with dark hair. Underneath the tall figure in Noah's careful childish print was the word Dad. Olivia's eyes filled with tears. She looked at her son, who was watching her with his serious, knowing gaze. It wasn't a legal petition or a public declaration. It was something far more powerful. It was a choice. A name given not by birth or by law, but by love. Their new beginning wasn't on the horizon anymore. They were already living in it, a year past, serene and blessedly uneventful. The echoes of the courtroom battle faded, replaced by the comfortable rhythms of family life. The estate in Brookline, once a strategic sanctuary, was now simply home. The arrangement born from vengeance and desperation had blossomed into something genuine and deeply loving. Olivia and Damien were no longer allies in a war against Nicholas Preston. They were partners in everything, their lives woven together by shared breakfasts, school runs, and the quiet understanding that passed between them over the heads of the children. The twins, now 7, had fully settled into the security of their world. The bad man, as Sophie had once called Nick, was a forgotten nightmare. Their lives were delineated by soccer practice, art classes, and the unwavering presence of 2 parents. Damien had seamlessly transitioned from a benefactor to a father in every sense of the word. He was the one who checked for monsters under the bed, who patiently explained Noah's complex science questions, and whose shoulders were the preferred viewing platform at parades. The final unspoken piece of their original bargain, the changing of the twins' surname, had never been mentioned. The revenge that had once fueled Damien seemed to have been replaced by a simple, profound desire for his family's happiness. To force the issue now would feel like referencing a painful history they had all worked so hard to overcome. The catalyst for change came, as it often did, from the children. Noah came home from school one afternoon, looking unusually pensive, a large sheet of paper clutched in his hand. He found Damien in the library, reviewing financial reports. "Damien," Noah said, his voice small. "Can you help me with my homework?" "Of course," Damien said, pushing the papers aside and giving Noah his full attention. "What is it?" Noah unrolled the sheet of paper. It was a template for a family tree with boxes branching out from a central space labeled Me. "We have to fill in our family," Noah explained, pointing to the boxes. "This is Mommy and this is Sophie, and my teacher said to put my father here." He looked up at Damien, his serious eyes searching. "But my last name is Beaumont, and Mommy's is Beaumont. What name do I write for my father?" Damien's breath caught in his throat. Here it was, the culmination of a 9-year journey posed as a simple homework question by a 7-year-old boy. The choice was not his to make, or even Olivia's. It was Noah's. Kneeling down to be at eye level with the boy, Damien's voice was gentle. A father is the person who loves you, who takes care of you, and who promises to always be there for you. The name is less important than the person. You can write whatever name you feel belongs there. Noah considered this with his typical gravity. He picked up a green crayon, and in the box reserved for his father, he carefully wrote the name Damien. He didn't write a last name at all, as if in his mind the name itself was enough. Then he looked at Damien and asked, "Is it okay if I borrow your last name too? Devereaux is a good name for a scientist." A wave of emotion so powerful it almost staggered him washed over Damien. The cold revenge he had plotted for years seemed like a pale and insignificant thing compared to this simple, heartfelt request. This wasn't about erasing Nicholas Preston. It was about being chosen. That evening, after the children were asleep, Damien found Olivia on the terrace. He held the family tree in his hand. He didn't need to explain. She saw it in his eyes. "It seems the children are ahead of us," she said, her voice soft. "I loved Isabel." Damien said the admission raw and honest in the quiet of the night. "Losing her and Thomas, it hollowed me out. I thought all I had left was the anger. I never believed I would have this again. A home, a family, love." He turned to face her, fully taking both of her hands in his. "I don't want to be your benefactor or your partner in our old arrangement anymore, Olivia. I want to be your husband. And I want to be their father, not just in practice, but legally, and in my heart for the rest of my life." He didn't get down on one knee. It wasn't a grand theatrical proposal. It was a quiet, solemn promise offered between two people who had already built a life together. Tears streamed down Olivia's face as she smiled. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, of course, yes." They decided against a large wedding. Their union wasn't for public consumption. They held a small ceremony in the garden of their home, surrounded by a handful of close friends and family. Noah was the ring-bearer, and Sophie was the flower girl, gleefully tossing petals all over the lawn. When the judge officiating the ceremony asked for the rings, Damien presented Olivia with a simple, elegant platinum band. Olivia in turn handed the judge not a ring, but a set of documents. They were adoption papers. In front of their loved ones, Damien legally adopted Noah and Sophie, and the judge pronounced them officially and forever the Devereaux family. Their last name was no longer a weapon to be used against a vanquished enemy. It was a banner of unity, a symbol of a family forged not by blood, but by choice, resilience, and an extraordinary love. As Damien, Olivia, Noah, and Sophie stood together, they were a testament to the fact that sometimes the most beautiful beginnings are born from the most painful of endings. The ghost of Nicholas Preston was well and truly gone, not because he had been destroyed, but because he had been rendered utterly irrelevant by the simple, powerful, and unshakable force of a happy family. In the end, this isn't just a story about a husband's shocking betrayal or a billionaire's calculated revenge. It's a testament to the incredible resilience of a mother's love and the unexpected ways a new family can be forged in the fires of adversity. Olivia Beaumont didn't just survive. She rebuilt her life from the ashes, creating a world of safety and love for her children with the most unlikely of allies. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the family we choose is stronger and more real than the one we are born into. What would you have done in Olivia's situation? Could you have accepted help from your husband's greatest enemy? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of heartbreak resilience and ultimate triumph moved you, please give this video a thumbs up. Share it with someone who loves a powerful real-life drama, and make sure you subscribe to our channel for more unforgettable stories. Thank you for listening.